Good evening, folks. I see quite a few of you starting to roll in. I'm Jared Larson, and I'm here with Josh Miller of Riverstone Kennels, as well as Retriever Roadmap. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Basically, what we're going to do is just kind of intro, what Josh does at Riverstone as far as training up retrievers, and dive into Retriever Roadmap, why he built it, who it's built for, and just kind of some of the details surrounding that. And then, of course, we asked you guys a number of questions in your email registration that you guys sent in. And then along the bottom of your Zoom screen there, you'll see the chat as well as a Q&A spot. So chat is a great spot to introduce yourself, tell folks what kind of dog you got, what age they are, what you're doing for training. And then Q&A is a great spot to just drop your questions in that we'll have Josh answer live here. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll just kind of give it a couple more minutes for some folks to roll in here, and then we'll kick it off. So Josh, you been out doing any turkey hunting, or dogs controlling your lives right now in the spring here?
Yeah, man, dogs are definitely take the front seat. But what's funny is, so we do a lot of training on our farm. So we have a farm here that the kennel sits on. And especially when we're doing like puppies and yard work, we'll be out there. I have a guy named Dave who Dave's trained. He's worked for me for 10 and a half, going on 11 years. He's been with me a long time. And so we'll be working like puppies or something like that. And all of a sudden and we both stop and look. And if he really starts hammering, we're like, well, let's take a quick break. And then we go run off after him. So it's kind of fun to have that flexibility. But yeah, this is definitely, we're in the middle of dogs. We call it hay season, right? It's like, got to make hay while the sun shines. And up here, especially in Wisconsin, the reality is we fight Mother Nature. And so we do not take any gun dogs in for training over the winter time, mainly because I just can't do the same job in the winter that I can in that spring and summertime. And I just don't believe it's fair. Like, I can't look you in the eye, shake your hand and say, hey, like, you got the same work for the same cost in the winter. You just can't do that. So and I hunt so much during the season. So I spend like this year I was 92 days hunting, just waterfowl hunting. So we start in Canada, North Dakota, Missouri, Kansas, Texas, Nebraska, Arkansas. I actually have a camp in Arkansas, so we spend a lot of January down in Arkansas. And to me, that's why I do this, right? So the whole reason I even got into this in the first place, like, my dad wasn't a dog trainer. Quite frankly, we had 2 Labradors growing up, and probably the most impressive thing they did was catch a potato chip as we threw it off the couch. Like, it just was not at all a gun dog type deal. And so, although I love archery hunting, we were talking about that earlier. That's kind of my me time. I was kind of the black sheep of my family, to where I just was infatuated with waterfowl. I just loved ducks. I loved geese. I loved the interaction, the calling. I loved everything about it. And so my grandfather had a cabin up in northern Wisconsin, and he had like 40 acres in the back. And so we would go up there on the weekends, and my dad and brothers and uncles would go across the road to deer hunt in the mornings, and I would take my little canoe out and I'd go duck hunt and try to figure out what I was doing. And as the natural progression goes, you want somebody to do that with, and the obvious answer is a dog there. So I got my first dog. I have a little bit of an obsessive personality, to where I just don't like doing things halfway. I want to do them as best I possibly can. So I just poured myself into this. I read every book, watched every DVD, spent a lot of time with them. And just ironically, a lot of these things work. I was at a Sportsman's Warehouse. I don't even know if they have Sportsman's Warehouse anymore. If they do, they're not in the Midwest. But I met a guy. I was 16 years old. I was in the dog aisle, and guy introduced himself. He's like, "Do you have a dog?" Started talking to him. Well, he was actually the secretary at the local retriever club. So he invited me out to a training day. I was super nervous. I got there, and I had no idea the level that I had that dog trained at. So that dog ended up being very successful. We field trialed, we hunt tested, very successful, which made me feel confident. And that fueled my passion to go do this. So from there, I was fortunate enough to be able to connect with a lot of very successful trainers and learn under them. Being in the competition circuit, I was able to see guys drifted in and out very, very quickly. And one of the things, as I talked to people, was you can't have one way of doing things, right? If you have one cookie cutter and say, this is how you have to train a dog, it just naturally doesn't fit for everybody. And so I trained under 7 different people to learn as many ways as possible. There's some stuff I took from everybody I liked. Some people I didn't take some things. I still have them in my back pocket in case I would ever need it, but I kind of morphed what I felt like was the best program for me, but I still had those other ways in my back pocket. And Retriever Roadmap, we'll talk about that here in a second, but that's the whole idea behind Retriever Roadmap. And the whole idea is we're all trying to get from point A to point B, but we're all going to take different routes to get there, right? Between our strengths, our weaknesses, our dog strengths and weaknesses, what tools we have available, what property we have available. There's so many things that dictate how we navigate, but find what route is best for you. And so as a part of this program, we have multiple different ways of doing things. Do you want to use an e-collar? Do you not want to use an e-collar? Do you want to go through trained retrieve? Do you want to go through hold conditioning? Do you want to go, like, there's so many different things that you can do. Find what's right for you. So that's kind of the quick version and breakdown of that. Today, we breed British Labradors. I spend a lot of time overseas finding the right dogs for me. I'll kind of, if you guys have questions on that, I'll dig into it a little bit because I love my dogs. There's a why behind me having those dogs, but obviously with my background of wanting to be competitive, I'm looking for a lot out of them too. And so there's kind of a fun dialogue there, but I won't bore everybody with all the stories yet.
No, that's awesome. That's great background. And I think, just explaining a little bit what you're doing at Riverstone, where you are personally taking folks' dogs and keeping them, at your kennel, training them for the duration of the summer and then sending them back home versus what you've built for Retriever Roadmap. So kind of talk about the two paths there and why, somebody might choose A versus B and, what that looks like.
Yeah. So I started training professionally, started my own kennel. I want to say 13 years ago now, maybe going on 14. I don't feel old enough to actually be able to say that, but I am. And so, the big thing for me was I love training. And so I was bringing in client dogs that started very locally. As you can imagine, as you build any business and build a reputation, you start with anybody that would give you a chance, and then it morphs into something more. What it morphed into for us was a lot of long distance clients. I've trained dogs from people from literally, 49. I don't have New Hampshire for whatever reason. That's the only state I haven't trained a dog from.
Interesting.
But I have British Columbia. I've sent dogs to Sweden, to Russia, to England. I'm trying to think of Australia. Like, I've had dogs literally come in from all over the world to train. And what's neat about that is the different applications. You could take a Labrador Retriever and think about how different a Labrador Retriever is used from the guy who's going to pheasant hunt in South Dakota to the guy that dove hunts in Texas to the guy that duck hunts in Arkansas. That Labrador is very situationally, you can do a lot with that dog. You start going to other countries. I mean, sometimes I was having to ask these owners, like, okay, walk me through, like, how are you actually going to be hunting? And then trying to, prep that dog the best I can. But the long distance thing, the hardest part about that was not training the dogs, it's training the people. And that holds true no matter where you are. Like, training the people is way harder than training the dog. And so, for me, I had to get creative with how do I get people the information to be able to go not only continue on what I did training wise, but then like to retain it, right? Because if you go buy a Corvette, you might have to change the oil, put gas in it, but 5 years later, that Corvette should still drive like a Corvette, right? It's not the same way with your dog. So you pick a dog up, if you don't do any work or maintain for a year, for 2 years, like, you're not going to be at that same level. You're certainly not going to progress, right? The dog is going to be a product of their environment and will regress if you don't do it. So we had to get creative. How do we teach the owner how to handle, and how do we give them the tools to go be successful? So that's honestly how Retriever Roadmap started. It was just getting our clients the content that they needed to refer back to be able to keep up the training. Then what happened was we just get so full. So if you call us today and want to get a dog in for training, we're booked until about middle of next year. So we're booking out way in advance. And so what happens is people call, they want to get dogs and we don't have room. I still want to help those people. Sometimes it's difficult to know how to help those people. So this was a way that I'm just like, look, let's just open this up to everyone, right? Everybody can have access. Everybody can walk through this. It's been a cool thing, just kind of let people know. But like, we tried to make this extremely affordable to get into. I mean, you're not paying thousands of dollars to get into this program. It's $29 a month. And if you get to a point, you're like, hey, something's going on, I don't need it, pause it. and then come back to it. Or if your dog's old and you're 5, 6 years old and you're like, look, I'm just kind of maintaining, I'm going to pause it till you get a new puppy, pause it like that. The whole thing is at your speed, at your pace. Like $29 a month to me, like for everything you're getting. Like I have an employee that literally fought me on this of like, there's no way you're giving out way too much for way too little. But when we started this, when we we're going to open it up to everybody, I know I'm talking business here, which is not why you guys are here, but it's just interesting to me. I'm a business guy. What I loved is right before we were going to launch this, I listened to a speech of Shaquille O'Neal of all people. Like I didn't know Shaq was such a big business guy, but I listened to him talk, and he said something that always stuck with me, which was, if you like his greatest companies have come from genuinely wanting to help people, not how do I make every dollar, not how. So how do you genuinely help people? And that hit me. And I'm like, look, we're going to make this crazy affordable. Everybody can get into this. Everybody can use it. Everybody can use it leverage. And now it's morphed into so many more things. We have training groups across the country with members that honestly is probably my favorite part of the whole thing. It gives you a group to go train with. It gives you like-minded people, different property, different grounds, different dogs. It's unbelievable what this has turned into. And I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, and I actually, like a lot of you, I've seen some folks come in through the chat that are in my same exact situation, as well as on the registration questions with a lot of young dogs, 0 to 6 months, 6 months to 1 year old. I have a 6-month-old black lab that's actually out in his crate in my truck as we're doing this, and I've been walking him through Retriever Roadmap since I got him when he was, a 9-week-old puppy. And it's been incredibly helpful because similar to you, I grew up with labs. They were, retrievers. They would retrieve 30 ducks a year, but very casual in our household. And I've made it a point to really try to get my dog River to be, the best retriever that my family, or that I personally have seen. We'll see if I get there, but I certainly have all the tools at my disposal to make it happen with Retriever Roadmap. It's been incredibly helpful and an awesome tool. And with that, we're going to be giving away a Retriever Roadmap membership in this webinar. So at about the halfway mark, we'll post a giveaway link. That way you guys can get entered to get the full experience with Retriever Roadmap to bring your dog to that next level. So
let me just jump in here real quick, Jared. So David, I see your chat coming in here. Man, thank you for that. I really appreciate that kind of feedback, because these hunt tests, even if you're on here, if you are not interested in hunt tests, don't worry about it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and preach hunt tests, but I got to give a shout out to 3 different clubs that I support and I try to donate to, and just, go be active in their clubs and on their days and their tests. 3 different groups reached out and said, hey, we're going to listen tonight. So it's kind of cool. This dog community is cool. But like Dave, like that right there, man, like that to me is that's been so special about this community, is that the dogs bring all these great people together. And that's something that I can look at and say, man, like my closest friends and some of my greatest networking has come from these dogs. And the worst part about these dogs is that they do come and go, but those friendships last forever.
Yeah. So with Retriever Roadmap, kind of walk folks through that have never been there. And folks, if you're, on your browser, it's just retrieverroadmap.com. I'd encourage you to go check it out while Josh is kind of talking through it, but you have it broken up into multiple sections, starting with a puppy onto, more core fundamentals, onto advanced retrieving, with a, older, more mature dog. So kind of walk through, conceptually the different modules that you have within Retriever Roadmap there.
Yeah. So the big thing is I wanted to make it to where we could take you through literally picking a puppy out all the way through that advanced training, because at the end of the day, I think all of us, especially that have retrievers, we all aspire to have that dog that runs the blind retrieves, the cast, the whistle stops, that does all the stuff. Now, whether we ever get there or not, whether that's because of family obligations, life gets in the way, work, travel, there's obviously a lot of things, but I feel like we all aspire for that. So I always wanted to give people that full roadmap to be able to get to whatever goal that they choose to get to. But, picking out a puppy is a very big important step of this, because if you do not have the right dog to start with, you could be the best trainer. I could give you the best guidance. You could have the best program. you're never going to get there. You know, I'm a big sports guy, which is why you see my whiteboard behind me as we kind of break down some training. I'm going to be able to kind of draw this out for you guys. Being an ex-athlete, this works for me. It helps me not only relay to you guys what it is I'm trying to tell you, but hopefully it breaks it down to where it's digestible for you guys too. But if you don't have the right puppy, that's a big deal. And so, you know, the analogy I like to use is, you know, if you gave me the water boy of the team and said, hey, Josh, you have a year to work with this kid every single day. But at the end of that year, he has to be able to play Michael Jordan one-on-one and beat him. Like you'd laugh, right? Because like the water boy is not built to be or beat Michael Jordan, right? So you have to have the right dog to begin with. If you have the right dog, now that dog is a product of their environment. So it's all on what you do with them, how you teach, how you train, the situations you put them into, right? Both positively and negatively, right? We hear all the time about gun shyness. More gun shyness to us, what we hear, a lot of you guys are going to laugh, but I promise you this is 100% the truth. Most times when we hear that dogs are gun shy, when I ask people that call me and say, hey, I've got this issue, how do we get over this? When I ask them what happened, people say, I shot a 12 gauge over my dog to see if he was gun shy. I mean, that's like the best way to make your dog gun shy, right? Same thing with the water. I just had a guy the other day call and say, hey, my dog's afraid of the water. And I'm like, hey, so tell me about your introduction. And he's like, well, you know, we were at the cabin. I tried getting him in there. He wouldn't do it. So I threw him off the end of the dock and thought he'd figure it out. He's a lab. He should like the water. Well, if you were 5 years old and I threw you off the dock, you know, you probably wouldn't, you'd be hesitant to go back in the water too. So sometimes you really need to understand how to make our dog successful. A lot of what I do is a lot of teach, a lot of build that confidence and then kind of go from there.
And that's what's been so helpful for me with Retriever Roadmap as a very green rookie retriever trainer is just the general guidance and direction. And the fact that, you know, you don't have to take all of the advice that you are giving in Retriever Roadmap. Like for instance, you know, I have another dog at my house that's my roommate's that heels on the left, and purely for training purposes in East, I put River on my right just because like I knew it was going to be kind of a cluster. And will I regret that someday? Maybe. But you know, like you said about e-collars, using them or not using them, I really like the way that you lay out the education part of it and then allow, you know, the trainer to choose what path they feel best for their individual dog, and, you know, their individual style. And then another one that you really led me on to is reading your particular dog, which I think you should talk a little bit about, because I had zero clue on some of the body language cues that River gives me to say, hey, I get it. And the body language that I use with him that either is negative or positive, even when I'm unaware that I'm doing it.
Yeah, reading a dog is probably the biggest skill that you as a trainer or a handler you should work on. And that's something that we break down in the program of different ways on how to do that. And I had a mentor of mine that I think he was probably the best person I've ever been around reading animals. He was a dog trainer, he was a horse trainer, very prestigious guy, but he would always tell me the same thing. He's like, Josh, a dog is a book, you just got to read them. Right. And, you know, at first it was like kind of cliche, kind of whatever, but then you should really start seeing and you understand why. Right. So like one thing, we had a training day here about a week ago, and you know, there's a guy that was kind of struggling with his dog a little bit. And I was like, okay, so tell me walk through this with me. Like, what are you thinking? Why are you struggling with this? And he said something which I thought was really interesting. He's like, man, he's like, he lies to me. Like he tells me he's going to do one thing and then he does something else. And that's what I'm having a hard time. And I'm like, look, the one thing, this is probably one of the best things that dogs have over people. A dog's never going to lie to you, right? He's telling you what it is he's going to do. He's telling you what he's thinking. Now, he may have told you it 2-3 steps before, but if you're reading him, that's where you can go apply and you can get ahead of it and have a better, you know, communication, better relationship. So reading the dog is very, very important. And then, you know, kind of going back to your point of, you know, there's different ways of doing this. And so, you know, some of you guys, whether it's like my buddies that are pinging in from, you know, HRC clubs, you know, one of the things that I've learned is that if you get around somebody that's like, this is how you have to do something, they probably don't have the experience, because there's so many ways to do something. I myself
I am always learning. My best mentors and people I learned under and trained under would say the same thing. I am always learning. I can take somebody new that has never done this before in their life, watch them and learn something based on what they're doing. Maybe it's something what not to do, but I can learn something from them. So this is something that there's no degree, there's no diploma, there's no, university you go through to do this. This is a lot of on the fly experience. And so because of that, it's a lot of opinion based. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this, but there's always more than one way to get it done. So if your dog is struggling with something, that's why we have multiple different ways of doing almost every step in here, is because if this doesn't work, don't force it. Don't get frustrated. Like a saying that I like to say is, don't beat your head against the wall hoping that it turns into a door, right? Find the door, find what way works best for you, what way works for your dog.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And the last thing I want you to touch on with Retriever Roadmap before we hop into some questions and breaking down some scenarios that people asked about on the registration emails is you kind of mentioned these strike teams and the community forums with Retriever Roadmap. Tell these folks a little bit about that so they can get a sense of what they would gain to acquire if they decided to get Retriever Roadmap and the value that the community within Retriever Roadmap brings.
Yeah, the community is something that was an absolute afterthought of mine. I'm not a forum person. I'm not a Facebook person. So it just wasn't something that I guess was in the forefront of my mind when we created this. It turned into my absolute favorite part of this whole thing. So the strike teams being that they're training groups that get together, you can see people. That's easy for me because I love face-to-face interaction. I love being there firsthand. The virtual stuff was super interesting for me to learn. But one thing, the number one comment that I get through Retriever Roadmap, whether that's the forum page or the Facebook group, we have a private Facebook group. You have to be a member to get into it. But the best feedback I get, and this is consistent, is that this is the only program, the only place that I feel I can go ask a question and I'm not going to get sarcastic answers, smart aleck comments back, which if you guys are on social media at all, if you guys go into these retriever groups, it's a lot of that. And that's one of the reasons I just get away and disconnect myself from it, because like somebody asked a legitimate question, like, how do I get my dog over this? Well, they don't need 10 smart aleck answers, making fun of this person. Like, they're legitimately trying to have a better relationship with their dog. I won't tolerate it, so it doesn't happen, in our groups. But our group, like, we just have so many fantastic people. And that's one thing I'm so proud of, is everyone's so encouraging. Everybody wants people to be successful. Somebody posts a picture of a ribbon or a first retrieve or something, you would not believe the comments and people, cheering each other on. These people have never met before. And so this is, again, just part of the really special community that gets built off this thing, and something I'm really proud of.
And I think that's the best thing about owning a dog. Within the onX hunt team, I don't know how many retrievers and pointing dogs have been picked up over the last year and a half, but we've it's at least a half dozen. And we're all comparing notes and stoked for one another. It's not like you and your neighbor deer hunting trying to hunt the same buck. Everybody's retriever can be at their best and everybody's still winning. So I love that part of Retriever Roadmap, and just kind of, I haven't even contributed much, honestly, with the forums. I've just kind of followed along with what other people are doing and gotten some feedback, from their struggles and their woes. And it's been super cool and super insightful. So with that, we're going to move into unless you got something else.
Well, I was just going to say, so one of the questions on here,
Yep.
Hey, Kyle Snow, you're asking about train groups in Canada. We'll send you, can we send him a message?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll send you a message with my email address. We have a number of Retriever Roadmap members in Canada, and some of those guys would be awesome people for you to connect with. Now, I know Canada is huge, so you may not be, geographically easy, but if you can get to them, fantastic people, great knowledge. They'd have places. That'd be a great one for you. I'll send you right now my email.
And this is the best part of Retriever Roadmap, is just Josh's willingness to communicate and make a personal relationship with each and every one of his members. It just, again, brings back that that really tight-knit dog community that everybody's cheering for everybody. And everyone wants to see your dog be as successful as they possibly can be. But with that, with Kyle's question, I thought he asked a really good one. Is equipment for somebody with their first dog? This is something that I recently struggled with. You read one thing, it tells you something, you read another and it tells you something different, which is exactly what you talked about. But I mean, you know, if you had a couple $100 to spend on your first dog as a puppy, as a young adolescent, what equipment are you getting for him?
Yeah, so you know, in the program, we break down a lot of different equipment. And the thing is that there's going to be pros and cons of everything. I saw somebody, Tom Burns, that's awesome. Talking about the retriever roadmap community and strike teams, about how that's great, man. I'm glad that, you know, great person, great connection, but it's great that, you know, that he sees that. But in that, like, you know, Tom's been a part of it. We use different equipment. Now we have the luxury to where I have to buy all this stuff, right? Because what I do for a living. So we have a lot of equipment, but what's neat about it is that when you get to come use it, you get to kind of see what works for me and what doesn't work for me. You know, so we have thunder launchers that can launch multiple bumpers in the same spot. We use a lot of this for young dogs that are like pushing through to have longer retrieves. If they get broke down and say, you know, they're doing a 100-yard mark, they've never done a 100-yard mark, so they start breaking down at 50, boom, we shoot another one, give them that confidence to push through. 2-3 times of that, they're knocking it out like a pro. But you can't throw birds. Okay, so now you're talking about a winger. Now the wingers can throw birds, right? I kind of make it easy. Like if you had bumpers like this right here, orange and white, if you had a dozen of both of those and a whistle, you can get the majority of this work done. You do not have to go out and spend an enormous amount of money. Now, why these two? I'll grab these here. Hopefully I don't. My wife made these decorations, so hopefully I don't knock everything over. Okay, so these two bumpers right here, this is a really good tip. So I'm very good friends with the owners of Gun Dog Supply. If you guys ever need any equipment, Gun Dog Supply is a fantastic place. They're dedicated to
one-stop shop. That's where I got my stuff.
That's right. And they're great people too, great customer service. If they talk funny, it's just because they're from Mississippi. I tell them that all the time, but seriously, great people. I asked him which one of these colors sells more. And he said it's enormously different, orange over white. Orange sells more than white, which I'm going to guess should be the exact opposite. Okay. So most people get orange because they see orange, they think hunting, they think I can see it, right? Which is all great. But the way that a dog sees in the shades and hues that they see, they don't see the color like we do. Orange will disappear against a green background, right? So if you have a dog that struggles when you're throwing retrieves for your dog and the dog like runs over it, that is very likely the dog can't see it. And especially rubber that has very little scent, or a new young dog, you could struggle with this, right? So orange should be for blinds. We want to take their eyes away from them. We don't want them to see it. We want them to rely on us to be able to direct them back to that. There is a spot for this, but if I'm working with a young dog that I want to just throw them retrieves, I want them to see it, I want them to go be successful, I want to use white. So orange and white bumpers, if you get, I mean, a dozen of each of these, you can probably get everything done. So you don't need to go out and spend anything crazy on tools or equipment. And I know, like, you can make the argument for a lot of different things, you know, that you could use, you know, other things. I'm trying to be very elementary about this to where anybody can do this without having to spend a fortune to get into it. There are a lot of tools that make life a lot easier, but those bumpers right there, hopefully that was an aha moment for somebody out there. Well, it tends to be. So, you know, this is just one of those cool things you kind of learn and you can go apply it.
And so I'm currently on a little turkey road trip. I'm, you know, and my dog River's with me. I threw his white bumper about 30 foot up into a tree and it didn't come down. So all I have left with me is the orange one that I threw in the truck. And you see it firsthand with the young retriever, the amount of times he's ran right over that thing in the last week or two. It's, yeah, I mean, it's frustrating a little bit, but you know, it helps to at least know why it's happening.
All right.
Let's see here. Another question we got going on is tips on de-cheating and making precise lines with a dog.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we're talking advanced stuff here, right? Because, and the reason I feel like it's important, you know, to note that is because a lot of it actually was overwhelming how many people, you know, that signed up for this when it was the year and age of their dog. it's 6 months to 1 year, 6 months to 1 year, or 0 to 6 months was another really big one. So a ton of young dogs out there. So this is not something to get into now, right? But lining really comes from, if you guys don't know what lining is, it'd be specifically on a blind retrieve when your dog does not know where they're going to. How do you get them? How do you point them? And how do you get them to run that straight line, right? So I have what is my absolute favorite lining drill. I'm not going to break that down here because we would spend the next hour just on that, but it's a progressional thing. Okay. But the biggest thing is, how do you teach the dog to confidently go away from you? And how do you get them to not be eye reliant? So there are a couple tips here that I have for you. The first one is if this is your goal to get to blind retrieves, you can overdo it with marks and just throw in retrieve after retrieve after retrieve after retrieve for your dog. Because if you wait until 3-4 years old to start running blind retrieves, you've given your dog a ton of time, an enormous amount of their life, thinking, I'm really good at using my eyes and I'm really good at seeing what I'm going to go pick up. Okay. So gradually starting to take that away from them and make them less dependent on their eyes early on. That is in the program. But one thing I want to talk about specifically with lining is a little bit more with keeping your dog online. Okay. So I'm going to go to my whiteboard here to kind of illustrate this a little bit. And so let's just say you are running let's just say you're running to this point right here. Okay. And you're starting down here. So first, put yourself in the dog's shoes. That dog is looking out at a sea of, if you're in a hayfield, it is a sea of green. Everything looks exactly the same. Okay. But for us as a handler, what we want to do is we want to keep them on this imaginary straight line. Okay. And this is an awful straight line. So you'll have to give me a little lenience here, but in a straight line, shortest distance in between 2 points, a straight line, right? So when we send our dog and our dog starts to go, I'm going to use a different color so you guys can see the difference here. So when our dog starts to run, what I always tell people when I'm coaching them is, I want you to be quick on the whistle, slow on the cast. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if your dog starts trailing off this, okay, and starts kind of getting off into la-la land, don't let him get way out here before you stop him. Okay, because an angle back cast is going to be much more difficult for most dogs than a straight back cast. Quick on the whistle. Don't stop him here. Stop him here. He told you he was going to do it. Stop him as close to that line as you can. Quick on the whistle. Now, slow on the cast means tweet. Let the dog sit and calm down before you give him the cast. When I see people go, tweet cast, what you're telling me is you don't trust your dog. You don't trust your training, right? So what I mean by slow on the cast is, if your dog is drifting off this way, okay, and you stop him, especially if you have a dog that's driven and kind of independent, your dog has made up his mind for whatever reason he's going this way. So if he just barely starts to turn, you give him a cast, he's going to go, I know where I'm going, and you're going to fight with him more than not, right? I'm generalizing, but that happens a lot, right? When you slow things down, tweet, make him turn, stop, think about it, make this eye contact, let's buy into this together. And then I give you a cast, it gives the dog time to slow down, submit to you, and then let the training take over. Now, here's something else. I'm kind of digging into more advanced stuff here. I know we're going to bring it back a little bit, but I want to take this kind of one step further. Most dogs, now this is a part of reading your dog and knowing who your dog is. Most dogs are going to be consistent in which way they spin. Okay. So I have, so like Brock is that dog right there. That you might not be able to see it. I have dogs kind of all over this thing. Every one of those dogs is different. As far as, like, I have some dogs that spin left. I have some dogs that spin right. Okay. Why is this important? Because if I have a dog that spins right, okay, and he starts doing that same kind of drift, okay, so he's drifting off this way, I may let him go a little more, because when he spins right, he's going to come back in towards that line, which keeps him in line. Okay. But if I have that same dog that spins left, I'm going to stop him more in here, because here he's in line. If I stop him at the same spot and he turns left, That's a huge difference. And he gets pulled further and further offline. So this is you learning your dog, knowing your dog, and just in your head, keep that imaginary line in there. How can I stay on that imaginary line as much as possible? Some of these terms are new. What is de-cheating? Okay, that's a great one. Let's not dig into that one in here as far as in depth of how to go through it, because there's a lot that goes into that. But de-cheating is essentially, let's take this body of water. Okay. This is a body of water. If you have so let's just say you're running from right here. Okay. And you have a retrieve that lands right here. Okay. De-cheating is we want that dog to go straight there and straight back. Shortest distance in between 2 points. Okay. Now, this is often where I'll get people like, look, I'm just a hunter. I don't care. Okay. But you should care a little bit. I'm going to tell you why. Because if we have decoys all over the place in the field, right? Okay, so decoy all over this thing, right? If your dog doesn't leave that mark, it can mark that bird, it can get on there and be as efficient as possible as a retriever. Okay. If your dog goes, nope, I know a shorter cut, is going to run all the way around the pond and is going to enter it from this side, the picture that dog took when that bird landed is now much different coming from this angle. So you have a crippled bird, all of a sudden starts ducking and diving through the decoys. Your dog is lost. The dog doesn't know where it is. Now, if you have a dog that handles, okay, maybe you can still maneuver him there, but oftentimes you don't. So now your dog is swimming, going through the decoys. This bird has now seen this dog, is kind of doing that whole duck and try to swim low to the water. Now all of a sudden, this bird gets over here. Now you've got more birds coming in. It's chaos, right? Straight there, straight back is always going to be the cleanest and most efficient route, not only from an energy standpoint, but as a retriever. We want, from an outdoorsman, I want to be as ethical as possible. I'm going to pick these birds up as quickly as I can, dispatch them as quickly as I can if I need to. And having an efficient retriever is a huge part of that. So that would be de-cheating. So de-cheating would be teaching the dog to run the straight line and not cut that corner.
Well, I hope some of you guys on this webinar's wheels are turning as much as mine as a young retriever owner, because boy, am I screwing up. Like I was giving River praise for, well, cheating because he was getting there quicker. So yeah, just so much to learn as a new dog trainer and dog handler. And that's exactly why using Retriever Roadmap is going to be so beneficial. Clearly, I need to go a little bit further than I have in the course rather than just jumping River ahead a little bit. So one that was such a common question, or I guess common gripe of folks in their retriever training, was getting them to bring the bird to your hand.
Yeah.
So many folks in there said, as soon as he gets out of the water, he drops the bird and shakes. As soon as he picks it up, he goes and, runs around with it. What are some things that folks can do to, get a retriever to bring that bird to hand?
Yeah. Okay. So, you guys have probably heard of force fetching, right? It's really interesting. So I talked about all the guys that I trained under when I was learning how to do this, right? Everybody did things differently, but the one thing that they did very commonly the same was force fetching. You went through and did the same thing over and over. And when I started my career, I did the exact same thing because that's what I was taught. That's what I knew, right? Force fetching was the one thing that oftentimes when I was working for guys, they said, you cannot show a client this, because oftentimes it's putting a lot of pressure on dogs. You're pinching a toe, or pinching an ear, you're pulling a toe, you're doing something to add fairly extreme discomfort to make the dog do it, to teach them how to use their mouth. I just didn't like that, especially if I'm telling you to go do it at your pace, at your house, to your dog. There's going to be that empathetic side that's like, I can't do that, right? And I didn't like doing it. So what we did is we developed what we call the trained retrieve. The result is going to be the same. It might take you longer, but we're going to teach the dog how to use their mouth. We're going to teach the dog what is right and what is wrong, what hold is and how to deliver that. Now we also have hold conditioning, right? So again, in retriever, we have different routes for everything. Do you want to go through trained retrieve? Do you want to go through hold conditioning? Watch them both, figure out which is best for you and your dog. You may start with hold conditioning, go, gosh, like, you know, he actually needs to go through the whole thing. Let's backtrack, put him on the train retrieve route. This to me is a crucial part of a retriever's development. And why this is because it formalizes their job. Most retrievers, when they retrieve, when they go get something, it's not because we taught them that, right? So like I make a joke, with people that bring puppies home. I always say, like, if you take your 7-8-week-old puppy home for the first time and you start throwing that puppy retrieves, the only reason you're doing that is to verify to yourself that you bought a retriever, right? Because like you're not teaching them anything. That is in here. Mom and dad and grandpa and grandma, everybody, that's genetics. That's why genetics is so important. But when he goes to get it, that's genetics. When he's coming back, oftentimes dogs fail to understand what their job is as a finish line. Going through a trained retrieve and formalizing that, what that does is it teaches the dog, hey, your job is done. When you get to my side, you hand that bird off, right? Like that's your job. And what happens is that when a dog goes through that, there's almost a maturity that comes through. I think it's more of a clarity than anything of a dog just going, oh, I get it. I know what I'm supposed to do, right? And when they do that, all of a sudden your relationship with them is better. They understand what you're saying. You understand what they know they're supposed to do. And it's just like that teamwork just kind of churns. Now it can be a very significant process. You could take 1 to 3 months to get that done, depending on the time, depending on what you have available to you, how consistent you can be, what your dog is like. There's so many factors to this. And that is why in our program, you will not see day 1 do this, day 2 do this, day 3 do this, because I understand one of you guys might be an attorney, one of you guys might be an accountant that is like crazy busy now, but may have some more time here in a month or two to get, like, everybody has different schedules. And so this cannot be a 1, 2, 3 ABC kind of thing. Go at your pace and get it done. But that retrieve to hand, to me, what it does more than anything else is it clarifies what your job is. You know how to start it. Now I'm giving you that finish line of how to complete that.
Yep, love that. And I mean, at the end of the day, they're like children. If you have children, you know how much work they are. You need to get out there and spend time with your dog and, reinforce everything that you're teaching on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Another one that came up a ton is breaking dogs. You can't get your dog to stay on their place after that first gunshot. They're out there, they're jonesing to go get that bird. What are some things that you can conceptually speak to, on early breaking dogs?
Right, for sure. I should have asked you this before we started. Can I share my screen? I have a video I could pull up here.
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Yep. So if you just do that share screen option.
Okay. All right.
That's top one. Yep. And then just hit share. Nope.
Oh, this
that
one.
one. Yep.
This one here. Okay. Share. Sorry guys, I'm a dog trainer, so I can be a little technically uninclined here. Let's see here. This is the right one. It's back. Okay, so I think this is the one. Okay, so I'm gonna open this up here for you guys. Well, I'm gonna play this now. This is a clip from a hunt in Arkansas. This is a speckled belly hunt here. So I'll just play it and I'll kind of break it down for you guys. All right, so the first thing you guys probably notice is I need way better friends, because all 3 of those birds definitely should have fallen. But listen to the gunshots. Okay, down in this part of the area, you're going to see a dog running. Okay. Right here, see that dog? Listen to that again. Like, are you kidding me? Of all the things, how do I
stop? Is just that red one.
Stop, yep. Sure.
Perfect.
Yep. Awesome. Are we good? You guys see me again? Oh, you can't hear the video. Dang it. Hopefully that.
I'm not sure we're going to be able to make that happen.
Okay.
But bottom line, guns were still going off when you saw that dog dang near to the downed bird.
Yeah. So that to me the best picture I can paint for you. So first off, that was not my dog. That was the dog that we just happened to show up. That dog was hunting with us that day. But over everything else, I could talk about how it makes him more of an efficient retriever, because that dog sits there and goes, I can see that one, I can see that one, I can see that one fall. More efficient retriever. Safety is the number one importance. To me, if your dog is if your dog won't even go pick up a bird, if your dog is at least steady, that is going to be the number one requirement for me for a waterfowl dog going in the field, because you as the dog handler, you're going to think about your dog. But the 7 guys that are there to pull the trigger and to shoot are going to think about pulling the trigger and shooting. And they're not going to think about that safety side of things. We, knock on wood, we've never had an issue. But we hear horror stories of dogs getting shot and accidents happening because of the dog breaking like that. A safety thing first and foremost. You think about when you pull up, when you're in a pit, you're at a ground blind, even if you're in some of these, A-frame style blinds, like these guns are still at a pretty low level, right? And so your dog getting out in front of those gun barrels is the most difficult place, or the most dangerous place for that dog to be, because those gun barrels are going off. So that right there is an example. If I would have played the video more, you would have seen we panned to my dog that was sitting there being steady. I actually think there was a second dog running around. Like, those are just kind of those chaotic hunts that you just got to roll with it. When you're invited on some of these things, you're on the road, you're kind of jumping in with people to hunt. But that right there, I thought was a really good situation to show you guys. I mean, that dog right there was dang near catching that bird out of the air. Like that dog needs to be steady.
Yep. So right now we're going to post a link to the giveaway. We're going to put it in the chat. Follow that link. Make sure you fill it out. It's only going to be live for the next 24 hours. And only folks right here, right now, filling out that link are going to be entered to win that Retriever Roadmap membership. We'll post it again a couple more times throughout. So make sure you click on that and fill that out. We had a live question come in here on lead obedience. I cannot get my pup to stop pulling, even with the slip lead. Should I wrap the lead around her snout to prevent her from being able to pull, or should I wait, let her mature a bit? She's very young.
Yeah. So, I think to really dig into this, we'd have to define very young, right? So is very young 8 months? I mean, I've heard people call 18-month-old dogs very young. So there is definitely a maturation side of that. Now, more times than not, this is just kind of generally speaking, especially with the slip lead. So one of the ways that we go through our on-lead obedience and retriever roadmap is pressure on and pressure off. So if we ask a dog to sit, we say sit, pressure goes on that lead. The second their butt hits the ground, pressure comes off. So we are communicating with them. Pressure not right, pressure off, you did it right, right? And if your timing is right, it's very clear to the dog, hey, that was right. Now, if I comply that next time, I don't have to have pressure at all. But if your dog fights with you on that, oftentimes what the dog is saying is, not enough, not enough, right? So what we always say is 50% more. So sit, pressure comes on, no sit. We say sit, pressure comes on again, no sit, pressure comes on again. And what happens is that eventually the dog goes, okay, that's enough, I get it, and complies. And then through repetition, you can gradually back that off to where you don't need all that pressure. But being consistent is very important. What we find is that sometimes there's some mixed signals inside the house, right? So like if you are out going and trying to be very diligent with heel, being at the same spot, but then someone else in the family likes to go on walks and they feel like the dog should be able to just walk up ahead of them. A young dog especially is trying to learn what life is all about. Those mixed signals can really offer a gray area that can make things very confusing, for a young dog in particular. So just having that clarity is really, really important with that on-lead work.
Yeah, clarity and consistency. It's always make sure, if somebody else is taking your dog for a walk or you're having somebody dog sit for a day or two, is just to relay the information of like, hey, here are the commands, here's what I expect of that dog. Because sometimes I feel a bit like a helicopter dad when I, leave for the weekend and leave my dog with a buddy, just writing them a sheet on, hey, this is what I want you to be doing with them.
Right now, but with that being said, I'm actually going through the same thing for the first time. I've never had to go through this before. So I have a young dog named Solo that he's a stud. I mean, he's awesome. But he is infatuated with my 4-year-old daughter, and my 4-year-old daughter is infatuated with him. So being a new parent, she's my oldest. I've never had to deal with this before. I've always been routine with my dogs. Every day is the same. What I ask you is what I ask you, right? Very clear, very black and white. Well, She thinks she's a little dog trainer, right? And then Solo is her favorite. All the time I'm hearing, Solo come, Solo sit, Solo do this, Solo do that. Solo has no idea what is going on half the time because he's being a little girl's best friend. He sleeps in bed with her at night. He gets away with everything, right? I'm sure he probably gets fed off the table that I don't see. Like, I'm sure all this stuff happens. I am learning that I have to understand that that is a major role in his life and my family, right? So I'm not at all saying your dog has to be a robotic. I'm not all saying like your dog has to be a machine. It has to do this. You can't let it do that. The reality is that I expect a lot out of Solo and I'm pushing him to high levels, but I see it. The most important role that he is playing is my little girl's best friend. So there's definitely that give and take there. Like, I'm not at all saying that's kind of part of what we're all about, right? Like, we want our dogs to go do great things. We want to go see them reach the potential, do these amazing retrieves, amazing things. It makes our life more fun, their life more fun. But at the end of the day, like, what is your dog's role? That's going to be a different answer for all of us, but I think that's a really honest question just to evaluate and self-absorb there.
Yep. All right, this guy, I plan to bring a dog to you for your 3-week beginner bird and gun training. What can we do to help start him at home before I bring him?
Yeah, so for bird and gun intro for us, like we always say, there's no there's no prerequisite. Now with that said, I'd rather you not drop the dog off and be like, hey, I didn't want to screw anything up, so I did nothing, and have this like Tasmanian devil that you hand over to me. But what I will say is at that age, I'm really big on letting a puppy be a puppy. We're talking socialization. We're talking crate training. We're talking really basic like treat training. That's what we're talking about. I see way too often people trying to take a 10-month or a 10-week-old puppy and acting like they should be a 6-year-old veteran, right? It is tempting to go too fast. And I think society has taught us to go too fast. Anything you want in this world, basically, you can have in a click and 2 days shipping, right? We've all been conditioned to that. Dogs are not like that. And so sometimes it's hard for people to understand, hey, like for me, I'll talk a little bit about my red shirting, because this is a big thing that I've done. I've really started to preach this because I feel like this is super beneficial for so many people. Again, being a sports guy, I like sports terms. So I've started this thing that I call red shirting my dogs, which means my dogs don't get to hunt in their first season. They get to come out, they get to experience the hunt, they get to sit there, they get to watch, they get to be a part of the whole thing, but they don't get to go retrieve. I know this, and it kills me. I promise you, it kills me, especially when that one bird lands belly up at 10 yards and that young dog's looking at it wanting the worst way to send him. But what happens is that you think about a hunt and you think about training. Those are two very, very different things. And so you go from doing marks with bumpers in the backyard to all of a sudden there's 100 mallards spinning on top of you, landing on you. There's multiple guns going off. There's birds flying everywhere. That is overwhelming. That's like taking a little leaguer and saying, hey, you're going to go pitch at Yankee Stadium tomorrow. Like, there's just no way, right? It's just from a mental side, it blows a dog's mind. But when you bring these young dogs in and they can just take a breath and just desensitize to everything you can't train for, when you do let them finally go start getting retrieves, they're not the rubber band waiting to snap. Because here's what happens. That young dog goes on that first hunt, and all of a sudden he sees birds. There's whack, 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 whack on the duck call. Okay, duck call goes off. He looks there. Then he looks forward. He sees birds. Then all of a sudden there's gunshots. After gunshots, he gets sent. Okay, that young dog starts getting excited, going, "Oh, this is what we're doing, right?" All of a sudden he starts going, "Whack, whack, whack." Oh, okay. So hey, there's calls. What happened that last time after calls? Okay, I saw birds. Well, when I saw birds, I got to go. So then all of a sudden he's going before the shots. And then it's like one thing after another. And that's how you get these dogs that get overly anxious, right? So sometimes you have dogs, and we see this all the time at tests. You blow a duck call, mark, mark, and all of a sudden the dog going, just freaking out, right? Because they think duck call means they get to go retrieve. Right. So we desensitize them to all of this stuff before going out there, because probably the biggest comment and this was on a hunt that I had a dog run or blind retrieve that was just under 600 yards. Okay. Not our longest. He has a story that will blow your mind. This dog right here, Brock, under 600 yards. Like, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. Everybody talking about that blind. The number one comment I got off that hunt was there were 3 different people that came up to me and said, man, I forgot that dog was even there. That's how well-mannered he was. He was quiet. He was calm. He was under control.
right? That dog is a pleasure to have with you. That dog gets invited back on the hunt. That dog probably gets invited back before you get invited back, which means you get to go hunt more, right? That dog is who you want. I want them to go do that impressive stuff. But if they can't do this, they don't get a chance to go do that. So.
And I think that leads into one more question here. We're going to do a few more. We're coming up on an hour and then we're going to wrap it up. But this guy just says his dog is super vocal. The dog does great work, but he is vocal when honoring, barking at the first bird thrown. There's all sorts of scenarios where a vocal dog becomes a problem. What are some things that you can do to try to fix that vocality of a dog?
Yeah. So here's the deal. If we kind of go back to the beginning, I believe vocalization is more times than not genetic. You take vocal dogs, you're going to produce vocal puppies. That's why for me, when our breeding program, I have broken my heart numerous times of dogs I've absolutely adored that they just make a little bit of noises like, and I don't use them in my breeding program because I believe that is going to lead to more vocalization. So vocalization, I believe, starts with genetic. Now, with that being said, I also believe you can take a genetically quiet dog, mishandle them, and make them noisy. Okay, so somebody had said a very similar question to this about hunt tests. So I'm just going to talk about that. Same thing with the hunting situation we just talked about, right? If every time you went out and duck calls went off, that guns went off afterwards, birds fell afterwards, they got to go retrieve afterwards, that they're smart. They're going to figure that out and count backwards and go, okay, when calls go off, I get jacked up because I'm going to go do that, right? When I go back to the hunt test side of it, I think the same thing is desensitization. So when you walk up, we do this so much, and this is something I wish more people would do. We have a setup, everything's the same, holding blinds the same, buckets the same, guns the same, everything at a test. We walk up, we sit down, I blow a duck call, we sit there, I put the leash on and walk away. Like every time you get here, you don't get to go do this, right? Because if they think when I see a bucket, I get to go run a test, they're going to start seeing a bucket and freaking out. It's no different than, Jared, if every time that I don't know, whistled, I gave you $1,000, I'd whistle and you'd come running from wherever you could hear me from, right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, here's $1,000. That is $1,000 to your dog. Going and getting to have that retrieve, that is $1,000 bill. So we need to desensitize that. We don't want to diminish their drive, right? But unless you lose your temper, you're not going to diminish their drive, right? All you're doing is you're controlling the situation, not letting this unwind.
And honestly, one of the things that in your, foundation training in the puppy part is having him watch you go pick up a dummy that you threw. And that has been wildly helpful for River and I on just being patient, being steady, and understanding that every bird or every dummy that falls out of the sky is not yours. And so, obviously applicability into a lot of different realms of training there.
Yeah, because not everybody has dogs to be able to go honor and other people to help with. So we always have those kind of swings in there.
All right. Last question we're going to answer here is the last one that came in from Jacob Wirtz. He has a 1-year-old, 3-month chocolate lab. And she basically will not finish a retrieve. She jumps in the river, goes towards the duck, even almost touch it with her nose, but will not grab it unless he goes and assists. What would you recommend that he starts work on with that dog to complete a retrieve?
Well, trained retrieve is going to be your best bet. Now, with that being said, that's where kind of evaluate your dog. I mean, the reality is, and I know this is somewhat of a blunt response, I don't mean it to come across as rude, but some dogs just don't have it right now. From what you're saying, doesn't sound like it, but I think it's something at least to consider. But trained retrieve is going to be your absolute best friend on that. And so just going through that trained retrieve process, teaching your dog that, hey, you need to pick something up when I tell you to pick something up, or this is your job. It sounds like going out to it is not the problem, but once she's there, now this could be a bird shyness issue. If she had an issue where maybe we see this with pheasants a lot, they go up to a pheasant, have never been properly introduced to a bird, it smacks and spurs them, and that young dog goes, whoa, like I'll go back to bumpers. Like I'm not liking this. Like that poor experience is something you will have to fight to get over. So if that is it, I would still go through that trained retrieve, but then you transition the last transitional part of that is putting that dog and doing that same application on birds. That's going to build some confidence. That's going to make that dog understand that they can do it, and likely finish that process of, hey, when I get to that bird, I know what I'm supposed to do. and then finish that retrieve.
Yep. Love that. We're going to post the giveaway link one more time. It is currently still at the bottom of the chat, but we'll post it again. And that is the beauty of Retriever Roadmap, as Josh alluded to. If you don't win this giveaway, which you will know if you have won in the next 24 hours, you can pay $30 and dibble dabble around with the Retriever Roadmap, hone in on trained retrieve, hone in on, some of the steadiness work that he teaches throughout there. And just take it one step at a time. If you only need it for a month, use it for a month. If you need it all year round, use it all year round. That's what I'm doing. And so Josh, really appreciate the time here. And if you folks are interested in more from Josh, retrieverroadmap.com, go check it out. As an onX Hunt Elite member, we just formed a official partnership with Josh. So you're going to get free modules from Retriever Roadmap as an Elite member for puppy training, as well as hunt breakdown and analysis, like he showed with that spec there, as well as you're going to save $200 on the full course if you're an onX Hunt Elite member. So definitely check that out. And lastly, if you're interested in a puppy or full-blown dog training, where do they go?
So you can find the kennel at Riverstone Kennels. Go to riverstoneKennels.com. You can find us on social media. We try to share some stuff. YouTube, trying to be better at YouTube, trying to get some more stuff kind of put together there, specifically of our hunts and some training days. Otherwise on Retriever Roadmap. And I would really suggest when you guys look at that, take full advantage of that community, because like I said, those training groups, things like that. Like I just saw Steve that asked about Riverstone duck tollers. Like, we have people in the community that have duck tollers. I literally talked to one today. So there's just a lot of resources there, you guys. I think they're just fantastic people, fantastic networking. So Riverstone Kennels, Retriever Roadmap, you can find us there, and would love to help you guys with anything I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming out. Enjoy the time with your dogs, and make sure that you check out Retriever Roadmap and build the dog that you've always dreamed of having.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.